So Dr. Daryl Wingsu, he actually is shaping the frame for our conversation around microaggressions and also micro interventions that we'll engage with for the rest of the session. So we're standing on the shoulder of giants when we talk about Dr. Daryl Wingsu. He's a renowned researcher from Teachers College at Columbia University, and he has done extensive research on microaggressions and has offered us valuable insights into what the hidden messages are, what causes them, and he also has done a lot of study on how you can actually disarm them through strategic micro interventions. So while the term micro might imply smallness, as we talked about before, the reality is starkly different. For those who are targeted by microaggressions, they're significant, they can be persistent, and they can be deeply wounding, amounting to what Dr. Maya Angelou called death by 1,000 cuts. So this concept challenges the old adage that words cannot hurt. It emphasizes the real pain and impact of these seemingly minor incidences. So let's think about this. Though the term micro, the term may be micro, we know that the effects are anything but. They're significant, deeply impactful. So as we delve into this topic, keep in mind the profound cumulative weight of these everyday encounters, and think about what it's like for students who are still working on developing their sense of self as well as their sense of self-agency. So there are three types of microaggressions that Dr. Sue classifies in terms of the transgressions. There are micro insults, micro assaults, and micro invalidations. So let's take a minute to walk through each. So a micro insult is subtle. It's usually not intentional, but it conveys some type of rudeness or insensitivity, but generally is demeaning to someone's identity, particularly racial identity or heritage. Oftentimes they're seen as hidden messages, but they generally convey some type of hidden stereotype that the person, the user, is trying to present to the receiver. The second, micro assaults, they're explicit. So they're not subtle at all. When a person is receiving a micro assault, they know it. It's usually violent. It can be verbal or it can be an environmental attack, but the goal, the purpose is still very clear. It's to harm the victim. It can harm them through name calling, it can harm them through avoiding behavior and exclusion, or through purposeful discriminatory actions. And then the last, I think, is just a little bit more subtle, and it's a micro invalidation. It can be comments that negate or dismiss a person's experience or their feelings, particularly from marginalized communities. We often hear that said as, "Oh, I don't see color," suggesting that racial insignificance is contrary to what a person's lived experience is. So an intervention that one might use explores how color evasiveness might internally invalidate the challenges communicated by people of color. So now we're going to analyze how these micro interventions manifest and prepare to respond by broadening our mindsets through compassionate candor and moral courage. So let's look at some micro case studies. So we'll first start with the micro insult. So in a faculty meeting discussing diversity initiatives, a Black educator shares her ideas for inclusivity. A colleague responds, "It's great you're contributing, but let's leave these matters to those who have more nuanced understanding." This remark by the colleague subtly undermines the educator's experience and belittles her contribution based on her race. All right, so let's look at a micro assault. A Muslim girl who's super enthusiastic about joining the school's track team approaches the coach for tryouts. However, the coach hesitates and says, "I'm not sure if you can run effectively with your hijab on. It might be a safety issue." This comment, although it may appear to be about a concern for the student's safety, it directly discriminates against her religious attire. It unjustly assumes or implies that her job is a barrier to participating in sports, effectively excluding her, as well as reinforcing misconceptions about religious clothing in athletic contexts. And then our final micro case study are micro invalidations. So here we see an Asian student in an advanced math class who was struggling with the course material. And this young man approaches the teacher for help. The teacher, surprised, dismissively remarks, "I didn't expect you to have trouble with math. Students like you usually don't need any help." Now this comment invalidates the students and students' individual learning challenges, and it perpetuates a stereotypical assumption about Asian students excelling in math without difficulty, disregarding the students' unique educational needs and experiences. So these are all different ways that microaggressions can show up in a school space. So Dr. Wing Su created a framework identifying the different forms of racial microaggressions and how they interrelate. So we can look and see that with microaggressions, they can be conscious, unconscious, or derogatory. Now, when we talk about micro insults and micro invalidations, they often are unconscious by the director, by the person providing them, and they may come from their own hidden biases. But whereas micro insults, because they are so direct and explicit, those are generally conscious. And these are all the different ways that these microaggressions can show up in environments or how people may experience them. So this overview of Dr. Su's taxonomy categorizes microaggressions into these overarching types. And so now we're going to explore specific examples of how these microaggressions can lead to death by 1,000 cuts for students.